Today I'm going to tell you a story so quiet, it feels dangerous, set against the unforgiving silence of the Old West, where dust hangs in the air, and mercy is rarely spoken aloud. It's a place where survival often depends on looking away, and where a single choice can bind two lives together forever. It all began with one moment, small, almost invisible, but powerful enough to pull fate out of the shadows and force it into the open. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Cole Mercer found her just after the rain let go. A low branch of an old cottonwood bowed under the weight of a body hanging upside down. The rope bit deep into her ankle's skin, swollen and dark with bruises. Her body curved in a strained arched spine, sagging as if it had been pushed past its limit. Long legs, strong and lean, were marked with old cuts, streaked with blood that had dried into dark, cracked lines. Rainwater still slid from her toes, dripping into the red mud near Cole's porch. He stopped where he stood. Apache, what kind of judgment was this? Leaving someone strung up like an animal, one truth settled hard in his chest. If he turned away now, the noon sun would finish what the rope had started. No one would question it. No one would ever know. And he would go on living. The girl stirred barely. Her eyes opened, dark, steady, alert, but there was no plea in them. Her breathing came rough and shallow, each breath dragged up from deep in her chest. When their eyes met, her lips parted. Her voice scraped out raw as wind through torn flesh. If you want to, just do it. Silence fell thick and crushing. After a moment, she added quietly, "Either way, I can't fight back." Cole swallowed. He understood her words weren't only about the rope. His hand drifted to the knife at his belt. The blade caught the pale light left behind by the storm. Cole said nothing. He cut the rope. Her body fell cold, heavy into his arms. In that instant, Cole Mercer knew one thing without doubt. From this moment on, this land would never grant him peace again. He didn't carry her inside. He laid her beneath the barn awning on soaked ground where the stink of hay and manure was strong enough to dull the smell of blood. Only after checking the fence line for strange tracks did he crouch, slide his arms beneath her shoulders, and lift her. She weighed more than he expected, not from her height, but from hours of hanging that had locked her body stiff. She made no sound, only harsh, rasping breaths like air moving through split timber. Cole settled her onto a bed of straw and pulled the loft door nearly shut, leaving just enough space to cut the light. A thin beam slipped through the boards, crossing her sun-darkened face and the purple bruises circling her ankles. He brought water and cleaned the dried blood from her legs. When his hands touched her, she flinched, an instinct learned from pain, not mercy. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Just once." Then silence again. Cole Mercer had once had a family. There had been laughter in the small wooden house, then sickness, then a winter that took what little remained. In the end, all that survived was a rule: keep your head down. Don't look, don't ask, don't get involved. That rule died beneath the cottonwood. He wrapped her ankles in clean cloth loose enough to let the blood return. Her eyes opened and held his for a long moment. No fear there, no gratitude either. Only measure. She studied him once more. "If I die," she whispered, "you die with me." Cole Mercer gave a small nod. "I know." He pulled the rifle close and settled back against the barn wall. He wasn't guarding her. He was watching what waited beyond the boards. Out there was what killed people. The storm had passed, leaving the western night stripped bare and silent, so quiet he could hear his own heart. Cole didn't sleep. Every distant sound, the cry of an owl, a branch snapping the imagined breath of a horse, made his hands tighten around the rifle. By the time dawn edged in, her breathing had evened out. When the first pale light slipped through the slats, Cole rose. Before stepping outside, he turned and spoke low and steady. "If you wake before I do, don't run." "There's nowhere left to run." She didn't answer. But as he pulled the door shut, her fingers closed softly around a strand of straw beneath her, like someone choosing to stay one more day. She woke when the sun was already high. Light poured through the gaps in the boards, landing on the bandage at her ankle. She flinched, then slowly drew her leg in as the blood returned the pain, burning sharp and bright like live coals. Cole sat outside the loft, sharpening an old knife, steel rasped against stone, slow and steady like breathing. When he heard her move, he didn't turn. "You're awake," he said. Naya pushed herself upright, resting against the straw. It took a few breaths before she could speak. Her voice came out rough and low. "You cut the rope?" Cole nodded. "Yes." No questions. No explanations. Time stretched before she spoke again. "They hung me so I'd remember my place." The words fell into the quiet like a stone dropped into a dry well. She told it in short, measured pieces, as though each sentence cost her something. She was the granddaughter of Greyhawk, a former Apache chief who ruled by law and honor, not fear. When he died, power shifted into other hands. The new chief Red Crow wanted her as a concubine, not from desire, but to prove the old blood meant nothing now. Naya refused. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She said no. They hung her from a tree where everyone could see. So the other women would learn, she said. So they'd stay quiet. Cole stopped working the blade. "And they left you there?" She nodded. "Until I begged." "You didn't beg?" "No." Her voice didn't tremble. It was only tired. Cole stepped back into the barn and looked at her fully for the first time since he'd cut her down. "If they come back," he said, "you won't be a victim again." "I know," Naya replied. "I became a traitor the moment I said no." Silence settled between them. Then she lifted her eyes to him, dark, steady, unsettling. "You owe me nothing. If you turn me over, I'll understand." Cole glanced at the old rope tossed in the corner, frayed and stiff with dried mud and blood. "I already cut it," he said. "Too late to go back." Naya closed her eyes, not in relief, but because for the first time, one of her choices no longer dangled above her by a thin thread. On the third day she stood. She didn't ask permission. She gave no warning. She planted her hands in the straw and pushed herself upright, slow and deliberate, as if checking whether her body would still answer her. Her ankle remained swollen, the bandage dark with sweat, yet she made no sound. Cole Mercer was mending a broken stretch of fence near the barn. When he heard footsteps, he looked over once, then returned to his hammer. He didn't stop her. He didn't tell her to sit down. Out here, if you could stand, you stood. Naya stepped into the yard. Sunlight spread across her back, catching the fading whip marks that time hadn't fully erased. She bent, lifted a fallen length of wood, and swung it onto her shoulder. The movement was clean and sure, the kind learned through years of hard work. Cole saw it and said nothing. They worked side by side through the day. Cole set the fence. Naya hauled the wood. When the water barrel filled, she carried it first. When the ground turned stubborn, he broke it open. No commands were given. They did what needed doing. At midday, Cole set a piece of cornbread and dried meat on a wooden crate. Naya ate, then gave a single nod. That was enough. By late afternoon, the prairie wind rose, dragging red dust across the yard. Naya knelt and mixed mud to seal a crack in the barn wall. Mud streaked her arms and tangled in her hair. Cole handed her the old knife to scrape away the excess. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled back, not from want, but because there was no reason to fear it. That evening, they sat on the porch. Cole lit a cigarette. Naya sharpened a small blade. The quiet scrape of steel against stone blended with the insects singing in the dark. After a while, Naya spoke softly. That day she said, "I told you to go ahead." Cole didn't look at her. "Yes, you did, and you didn't. I didn't need to." Naya nodded. She asked nothing else. That answer carried weight. That night, as wind slipped through the gaps in the boards, Naya slept hard. No dreams. No sudden jolts. Outside, Cole walked the edge of the property, checking fence posts, watching the dirt road stretching toward nowhere. He knew the rope hadn't truly been cut. It had only been replaced by something thinner and far harder to break. By morning, Naya was already awake. When Cole stepped outside, the weakest section of the fence stood reinforced. She brushed dust from her hands and waited for him to notice. Cole looked and then nodded. No one said thank you. From that day on, they worked as if the ranch had always belonged to both of them. The first sign didn't come from the Apache. It came on 4 legs. That morning, Cole found fresh hoofprints on the road beyond the fence. They weren't deep. They weren't hurried. The marks of someone watching, not running. He crouched, touched the earth, then brushed sand over them like he always had. He said nothing to Naya. By afternoon, the wind shifted, and beneath it came the smell of smoke, campfire smoke, not settler-made. Naya stood on the porch steps, her eyes locked on the far tree line. Her body tightened, drawn taut, like a bowstring pulled to its limit. "They know," she said. Cole Mercer gave a small nod. Yes. They didn't speak again. As the sun brushed the crest of the hills, 3 Apache riders emerged from the distance. No war paint, no weapons lifted. They halted just beyond the fence, close enough to press their presence, not close enough to provoke. The rider in front spoke, his voice dry and even. The woman who was hanged. "Is she here?" Naya stepped forward before Cole could stop her. She stood straight chin, lifted her head unbowed. "I am here." Cole moved to her side. The Apache looked at him not with anger, but with a cold, measuring calm. "She was punished," the rider said. "You cut the rope. That was interference with our law." Cole answered without haste. "I cut what should never have held a human being." Silence stretched. Wind creaked through the fence rails. "They won't let this go," the rider said at last. "Not all of them." Then they turned their horses and rode off. No threats were spoken. That night, Cole dug shallow pits behind the barn, burying anything that caught the eye. Naya stacked sandbags to block the windows. No orders passed between them. They had already chosen the same side. Near midnight, hoofbeats sounded again, this time from the direction of town. Lantern lights slid along the fence. 2 riders stopped at the gate. A badge flashed in the firelight. "U.S. Marshals," one of them said. "We heard you're harboring an Apache punished under tribal law." Cole met their stare and didn't deny it. Naya stood just behind him, one hand resting on her knife. The marshals took in the yard and the barn, and the woman then exchanged a look. One jotted notes into a small book. "The law isn't on your side here, Mercer," he said. "We'll be back." When they rode away, the yard fell into a heavy, airless quiet. Naya spoke softly. "If you want to stop, there's still time." Cole looked across the hard stretch of land, the fence, the barn, the weather-beaten house. "No," he said. "Not now." And he knew it was true. From that day on, every calm moment, would be borrowed. They came again while the sun still hung high. This time there were not 3. Nearly 20 Apache riders formed a wide crescent beyond the fence. No paint, no shouting. Their silence weighed more than any threat. At the center sat Red Crow, back straight eyes, cold leather, marked with white bone beads. Cole stood on the porch with empty hands. Naya stepped out a pace behind him. She didn't hide. She didn't shrink. The legs once bound by rope now stood firm on another man's land, and she asked no permission for it. Red Crow spoke first. "You cut the rope of the tribe." Cole nodded. "I did." "You hid one who was punished." "I did." No excuse, no defense. No excuse followed, and a few of the warriors frowned. Red Crow shifted his gaze to Naya. "Granddaughter of the dead one," he said. "You were spared for the honor of his name, and you refused the place set before you." Naya lifted her chin. "I am not something to be handed over." A ripple moved through the riders, not anger, but doubt. Cole Mercer spoke then, his voice calm and even. "You hung her not for the law, but to make the dead die a second time." The air locked tight. Red Crow turned sharply toward him. "What do you know of the man who died?" Cole didn't flinch. "I never knew Gray Hawk," he said. "But I know what it looks like when the name of law is used to crush someone weaker." An older rider eased his horse forward half a step. Around his neck hung a worn bone, smooth with age, the mark of one who had ridden beside the late chief. This girl Stone Elk said was raised by him. He did not hang women to teach silence. Quiet spread through the circle. Red Crow's grip tightened on the reins. He looked around. The faces meeting his gaze no longer carried the same certainty. Then 2 riders approached from the town road. Lanterns swayed. Badges caught the light. U.S. Marshals, one called out. "Cole Mercer, you're under suspicion for harboring an Apache punished under tribal law." No one reached for a weapon. Red Crow glanced at the marshals, then back to Naya. For the first time, he hesitated. "We will decide," he said. "Not the white man." The marshals looked around and understood at once. Their law carried no weight here. Cole stood between 2 worlds belonging to neither. He knew only this: when the honor of the dead is dragged into the open, no one leaves without paying something. No gun was drawn. That was what made the moment more dangerous than any gunfight. Red Crow remained silent for a long while, his eyes moving across the circle of horses men, who had once lowered their heads at his word, now beginning to look away. Stone Elk spoke again, not to the chief this time, but straight to Naya. "Your grandfather," he said slowly, "died on horseback guarding the northern border. He left no sons, but he left his honor." He turned to the others, and today that honor was hung from a tree. The murmurs swelled no longer whispers. Shame rolled through the circle. Naya stood firm. She did not weep. She did not beg. She let them face what they had done. Red Crow's jaw tightened. "The law is still the law." "A law does not live," one of the elders answered, the words striking hard, "if the dead turn their backs on it." Another elder nudged his horse forward. Then another. Slow nods followed, spreading through the riders. Power slipped from the hands that had clenched it too tightly. At last, Red Crow lowered his eyes, not in surrender, but in the understanding that the ground had already given way beneath him. The girl, one of the elders, said to Naya, his voice dry and measured. The tribe was wrong. A single sentence, but heavy enough to shift everything. He turned to Cole Mercer. "You saved someone who was punished unjustly. Under the old laws, you are protected." Cole said nothing. He knew protection never came without a price. Another elder spoke. "The tribe will stand as her guarantee. And you, he added, looking toward the men beyond the fence, cannot take him for this. The U.S. Marshals, still outside the circle, exchanged looks. One flipped open his notebook. The other spat into the dirt. They understood. An old treaty had just been pulled from the ground. Red Crow spoke again, his gaze fixed on Cole. "You will no longer be invisible." Cole nodded once. "I never wanted to be." As the ring of riders slowly broke apart, Naya finally released a long breath. Not relief, weariness. Cole looked over his land, the fence line, the barn, the road that led toward town. From now on, he knew every step he took would be noticed. Naya spoke quietly. "They turned back. Because of me?" Cole shook his head. "No. They turned back because they couldn't stand the dead watching them anymore." He paused. "And out here, that kind of victory always asks for payment." The rain came 3 days later. Not a hard storm, just a steady drizzle enough to soften the cracked ground around the ranch. Cole stood on the porch and let it soak through his shirt. He didn't hurry inside. In this country, rain was never wasted. Naya stepped out beside him. Her ankle had stopped swelling. The mark left by the rope still lingered, pale but stubborn. She stood close, not touching, not distant. "They won't come back," she said. "At least not to hang me." Cole nodded. "I know." They watched the rain fall in silence. The soil darkened. The air filled with damp earth, with the scent of something that might grow if given time. Weeks later, the Apache folk began to pass through. They brought furs, salt, and herbs. They traded for grain, scrap iron, and a place to rest. Cole never posted a sign. He only opened the gate. The U.S. Marshals returned as well. They stayed beyond the fence longer this time, riding more, saying less. No arrests, but their eyes lingered. The name Cole Mercer had been marked. That night, Naya asked softly, "Do you regret it?" Cole lit a cigarette, watching the ember glow. "Some things," he exhaled. "If you regretted them, you wouldn't make it this far." Naya nodded. She understood answers like that. They didn't speak of the future. They didn't have to. Morning came. Work followed. Naya rebuilt the loft. Cole dug a trench for water. When the wind rose, they tied down the roof together. One evening, Naya placed her small knife on the table. The blade was sharp, cared for. "Here," she said, "I don't need to carry this anymore." Cole said nothing. He simply slid the knife aside, leaving the space between them open. That space wasn't a promise. It was only room to breathe. By the time fall settled in, the ranch had gained a small horse shed. More travelers passed through, but they spoke less. Out here, silence was its own kind of respect. One late afternoon, with the sun brushing the ridgeline, Naya stood beside Cole. Their shadows stretched long across the damp ground. "Maybe peace doesn't come quickly," she said. Cole nodded. "But it comes. If you don't turn away." They stood together, facing the open sky. On land that had once known only solitude, a home had taken shape. And that was enough. This place had always demanded payment. People lived here between hardship and choice, learning the cost of every decision. In a land like this, strength was often mistaken for kindness. The strong carried guns. They carried laws. They carried crowds behind them. The kind usually carried nothing but a conscience and a lonely choice. Kindness rarely arrived in moments of safety. It showed itself when no one was watching, when turning away would have been easier. It asked for no praise, sought no recognition, and promised nothing in return. People were kind, not because they believed the world would change, but because without it, they couldn't live with themselves. In the Old West, some understood exactly what that kind of kindness could cost. They knew that standing beside the outcast, might mean losing peace, reputation, even life itself. Still, they reached out, not to be remembered, but to save the part of themselves that hadn't yet been buried by dust and time. True kindness is never loud. It lives in the moments when someone refuses to tie another rope, refuses to look away, refuses to take what they could simply because they can. Most of the time, the kind are never rewarded. What they gain is smaller than glory, but heavier than gold, the chance to stand upright in a world that keeps asking you to bow your head or turn your back. Maybe they don't change the world, but because of them, the world hasn't lost all its light. And sometimes, that quiet victory is enough to keep going. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for being here and letting this story live within your heart. If it moved you, I hope you'll walk beside us through more journeys of the Wild West, stories filled with truth, endurance, and grace. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay close. Together, we'll keep riding across these wide-open lands of memory and hope. Thank you. Aviso Legal Barra Disclaimer. Our narratives bring inspiration from the past, recreated with fictional and dramatized interpretations for entertainment purposes only. AI tools serve as creative support, but the storytelling, editing, and emotional refinement are handled by our team to guarantee authenticity. We comply with content policies for I use avoiding impersonations, identity fabrication, or historically misleading images. All visual and audio content is legally sourced. Redistribution or modification requires prior written approval. Thank you for honoring creativity, collaboration, and storytelling done with heart.